I'm David J. Baumlin, and this is a conversation in 3 poems. I'm here with one of my best and dearest friends in the entire world, Joel Showalter. I was telling Micah in our interview rather recently that one of the fun things about this is because I was given advice when it comes to podcasting is to start in that first season. Start with people that you know, poets that you already are familiar with, and then you can build from there. And I had some people reach out to me, people that I didn't know, and I just kind of took a risk and reached out to some other people that I didn't know. And so it's this great mix. And I kind of want to look forward to doing that in future seasons, having people that maybe I've known a long time and people that I'm meeting for the first time, and keeping that variety. So like I said to Micah, why don't I ask you, how do you and I know each other?
Yeah, we went to college together for a little while.
Like 100
back
years ago.
at least 100 years ago. Back at a little college in my hometown called Indiana Wesleyan University. I got my degree from there. You absconded with your family and finished your degree elsewhere.
Fled for the hills. No.
We lost touch for a long time. Yeah. We lost touch for a good long time, but you reached out a while back. I don't know how long ago it's been. But yeah, over a poem actually, of mine that you wanted to use, and I was like, that name sounds familiar, and we've it's been a joy to be back in touch with you all these years. So
yeah, absolutely. When I reached out to you, I was looking to use a poem that I think you read in your senior presentation, and I was wanting to use it as at a workshop in a library that I was at. And now here I am, a librarian in another place, not too far from where I was at that time. And you work as an editor, but not a literary editor, except for when it comes to...
No, I work as a copy editor. Yeah.
Except for when it comes to me.
Yeah, I work as a copy editor. Yeah, well... Well, I help a little bit from time to time. Come on now.
You do. I'd mentioned to someone else that you and Micah were my first editors probably, or are my first editors before anything goes anywhere else. And there are 4 of us that meet every other Sunday to go over some poems, and happy that one of those is you. You honestly have been such an encouragement to me, even in this podcast project. In fact, a lot of the ideas that I had for this, I ran past you because I knew you were another lover of poetry podcasts and a listener, and I wanted to not repeat something else that somebody else was already doing, but to do something that stood on its own. And you gave me a lot of great feedback, and so I appreciate that, not just, again, in poetry or this podcast, but seriously, in my life period. So thank you for being here in all the different meanings of that phrase.
I'm happy. I'm delighted to be here, and it's very kind of you. But we help each other out. We run a lot of stuff by each other, and I count you as one of my closest friends. And you're always the first person I'm sending my stuff to as well. So
this will make this fun to look at a few of your works and the poem that you've chosen. And the way this works for anybody who's new to this. We read 3 poems and talk about them, and it's kind of the idea of this whole thing kind of harkened back to a little bit of me missing my radio days, but also missing my YouTube days where I used to take other people's poems and read them out loud. And I always felt like I got a better grasp of it when I wrapped my mouth around it, if I can use that phrase, put it in my voice. It adds a different dimension. And so I kind of had mentioned to somebody else that I picture that scene in I don't know if you saw the Dylan movie with Timothée Chalamet, but there's a scene where he's with Pete Seeger. He shows up late to the show, and Pete Seeger went ahead with another guest already. But the idea of Pete's little show on PBS there was he'd say, hey, I really like this song that you play, and it goes like this. And they would play together and, sing each other's work and talk about other work. And I thought that would really be a fun format to do for poetry. And so that's kind of what this is about. So part of the fun of it is I get to read the first one, and we talk about that. You read the second one of your choice, and we'll talk about that. And also because art doesn't really live in a vacuum, we're influenced by all the writers that came before us, as well as people that are writing now. And sometimes people that are writing now, we find connections with that we didn't even know were there once we talk about the poems or read them out loud to each other. So without further ado, if you're all right with my jumping right into this, there is a poem of yours. Most people are not going to be looking at the video there, but those who do, I just held up a copy of December magazine. It was volume 31.1, and that is where this poem was first published. And it's called In the Nursing Home by Joel Showalter. All afternoon and into the evening, we clasp my grandmother's hands, all bones and veins and lentigines. We placed our lips to her forehead, her temple, her cheek, inhaling the musk of her unwashed hair, avoiding the cannula strung across her aquiline features, thinner and sharper than they were last month. Her eyes open, her mouth slack, her breaths quick and shallow, her neck arched like a hatchling's. These are her last days. We all know it. The cavernous minutes not quite filled by our own desultory conversation and the tintinnabula of hymn tunes brought via Wi-Fi to the iPhone at her pillow. I need thee every hour, just as I am without one plea, when sorrows like sea billows roll. I sing these words to her, self-conscious at first, but sure, these phrases I have known since I was a child, sometimes sharing her pew on Sunday, her hymnal, my boyish soprano joining her sturdy alto for a verse or two, then rising above it for the final stanza. Like my voice ascends now over the low drone of the oxygen machine, crooning the melodies that will echo in me as I drive the 3 hours home, as I close the door to the bathroom and strip and step under the hot spray, exhaling as I begin to wash her from my hands, my lips, my skin, guiltily trying to rinse her weakness from my body. Even as the two fragile sails within her chest still flutter, as the leaky vessel at her center labors on, I am already putting spade to sod, some instinct impelling me to leave her behind, to distance myself from the bloom of disease in the air, from the blood stench, my face flushed with the shame of it, silently hailing the wolves and hawks that will find her, and not me, desperate to outrun them, all for just a little longer. Wow, I practiced that, Joel, and it was still hard to read at the end. So good.
Well, thank you for such a generous reading of it. Yeah.
One of the things that you and I were talking about ahead of time, partly because some of the poems that we chose, is the importance of sometimes writing the poem that you're afraid to write.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's some honesty in there that I think it's the kind of thing that you think, oh, do I really want to write this? Because do I want to say this out loud? But I am so thankful that you did.
Yeah, no, thank you. You know, it's interesting being a poet, a writer in middle age. I think that I am more willing to engage with the uncomfortable, the stuff that is perhaps stuff that isn't pretty. You know, this poem, the speaker is basically me. You know, this is about my own grandmother's death and about the facts of it and about my reaction when I got home from the nursing home. You know, but I think poetry, for me at least, is a perfect place to explore that stuff. It's a wonderful vessel in which to pour those less savory things, you know, the things that aren't as easy to talk about in water cooler conversation. Poetry's a wonderful place to explore and to hold those things. Yeah.
Yeah, a common theme that's been coming up this season is we talk about how poetry both is and isn't maybe in what ways it is and isn't therapy.
Mm.
And sometimes chasing after the scariest thoughts that you haven't been able to maybe say out loud, or you haven't been able to express. Yeah, that could be a vehicle for dealing with it. Of course, not the final poem. I mean, it's poetry isn't just regurgitated grief and forgive me, Whitman. It's not merely the barbaric yop.
Sure.
Even Whitman has spent the rest of his life editing that yop
Sure. Yeah.
over and over again in that in his one publication that he kept working on. So it is more than that. But it can be such a great, I like that idea of it being a vehicle toward being able to say what's unsayable.
Yeah, it's interesting. I listen to other poetry podcasts. Maggie Smith on the Slowdown
Yeah.
was recently talking about, she gets the question a lot, is poetry therapy? And her answer is no, I have a therapist for that,
Yes. Yeah.
And I do too, right? But I do think it's a place where we can turn those parts of our lives that we may be working in therapy with, and we can turn those over in our hands. And for me, it's a way to make sense of, or to make something broken whole, or to make something that is not beautiful beautiful, to find some kind of meaning in something that may not have a whole lot of meaning in and of itself. Grandmothers die every day, and that isn't all that meaningful, but this poem was a way to find some beauty, and of course to honor my love for my grandmother.
Yeah, I love the scene of going back in time to being next to her and singing with your boyish soprano, and then the way you bring it back into the room. And I guess the part where the difficult words come is, I think a lot of times, I think in my poems, there may be times where I stopped too soon. And I admire the bravery of you going forward and exploring those things, because I know there are things that I can relate to with my own mother's death. I wasn't there for any of my grandparents' passings, but for my mother I was, and sitting beside my good friend Dennis, holding his hand just hours really before he left the world. And I've always thought maybe I need to write about some of those. And I finally did in some ways. But when you can read some of your own experience and what, maybe not a total stranger, but someone who is outside of my head has experienced, it becomes more than just, what off was said and they're so well expressed. But, oh, wow, I didn't know that I felt that way. But now that you say it, really resonates with me.
Yeah, that's that magic moment when the poem takes over, right? That left turn in this particular piece really was that one of those moments that feel mystical, where the poem seems like it's leading me. It was leading me in a certain direction.
Yeah. Another thing that comes to mind when I read this, I love a poem that makes me pick up a dictionary. And I learned, lentiginese from this poem, but there seemed to be a movement for a while anyway. And maybe I'm saying too much to call it a movement, but there was a mood, at least among poets, that seemed to be shying away from what they would call sentiment. And I always thought that you need to have some guts and soul in a poem for it to be art, for me. Otherwise, if it were just an intellectual puzzle, a fun way of stringing together some words, then I might just be doing a crossword puzzle or Sudoku, which both are great. But in a poem, there's also got to be some guts and soul in there. And if you try to shy so much away from sentiment that you're just on the intellectual, then you can miss so much of what a poem can do by walking that balance beam between the mind and the heart. And I just think this poem is so full of both. I just feel overwhelmed by the time I get to the end of it for that reason. Even going back to this evolutionary ancestry of kind of how we left those weaker behind. I think it was Margaret Mead, the anthropologist, who you may have seen the quote keeps popping up a lot again lately, that when they asked her when is there proof in the record of the human race, when is there proof for civilization? And her answer wasn't the building of some wall or weapons or city, but it was a femur that had been broken and healed.
Okay. Yeah.
Because that meant that somebody stayed with someone, rather than, if I'm paraphrasing her, I think, but that in the wild, an animal with a broken leg is essentially a dead animal, because it won't have the time to heal before predators get to it. And so there's all of that in there, and you making it so personal. I hadn't thought about it, but the poem that you chose to read of yours, also not in a shower, but is another sort of steamy setting. If I'm not giving too much away. One of the things that's interesting is, while there are metaphors here, really it's, in some ways, it reminds me of some of Marie Howell's poetry that is actually not full of metaphor, but full of detail and full of imagery, and just masterfully done. And I thank you for letting me read it. Now, your poem that you chose, also your poem, I should say, doesn't take place in a shower, but it has some connections when it comes to steam, and yet does something very different in a very different setting. Is there anything you want to talk to us about that poem before you read it?
No, I don't think so.
We can just jump
we'll talk
right
about
in.
it afterward. Yeah,
Wonderful.
Let's do that. This poem's called Steam. Tonight, the heat persists, and yet I sit in the steam room at the downtown Y, counting and recounting the graying tiles on the dim walls on the floor, evading and catching the glances of the near naked men, all of us silent, listening for the hiss of the apparatus, the dispensation of the blistering mist. My gaze falls on the thin skin at my wrist, the hairs there darkened in the thick, sodden air, delicate whorls, almost black, twisted, damp. And my sight shifts suddenly to pictures from last night, shucking the ears of sweet corn at the sink, the dark, wild tangle at the husk's peak, and the fine fibers between the rows of pearls, wet threads that cluster on the counter, the simmering water sending its own steam into the kitchen and, further, into my memory. My mother, in another August, boiling water for corn, picked fresh from the garden stalk and quickly stripped. This supper by lamplight and the TV's spark. My father's face, hard as baked earth. Slow fans murmuring at the windows. The room taut and still as a thief. Expectant, poised, like the dried kernels, stained pink with poison that we dropped into soil, row after row in the spring, my father and I, our backs and necks slick with sweat, weary, unspeaking, like these men around me now who tense their muscles in this shadowed room, testing the invisible filaments that stretch between us in the heat, that promise or threaten to connect or ensnare us, like spider silk, glinting in the intermittent light, waiting for rain that offers no relief.
That's lovely.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Gosh, you have this way of going back and then forward in time and then back further that is just enviable. So you go from the steam in the steam room and to the sink, and then further back in time to the sink, and then further back in time to actually picking the corn. Is this kind of how the poem started in the first place in your head? Those thoughts just started coming as you were...
I believe that the genesis of the poem was looking down at the hair on my wrist and thinking, oh, that looks like that looks like the silk of corn. That looks like the
Yeah.
and so that visual anchor, I think, was what started the poem on its way.
What's the hair called that comes out of an ear of corn? I don't know.
Yeah, the silk, I think.
The silk, that's it. Yeah.
The husk and the silk. Yeah, the silk. The corn silks.
As you were
Yeah.
sitting there with husky men thinking about husking corn, but
Notes,
then also
yeah.
further back to planting it and the pink poison that we dropped into soil.
Yeah, that's a very vivid visual memory of mine as a kid. Planting the corn that was always, it had some kind of antifungal or something on the outside that was, vivid magenta
Yeah.
pink.
Interesting.
Back in Indiana,
Yeah, most of the kids that I went to school with, even if they didn't grow up on farms, they had jobs. They call it detasseling corn.
Sure. Yep.
Every year, and I somehow got away with not doing that.
Yeah, we were busy enough in our own garden, so
I wish I could figure out what it is about showers and steam and heat that is. I guess there's the metaphor of cleansing involved.
Yeah, I wonder if for me those places feel kind of like, well, it's a popular word these days, but they feel like liminal spaces. They feel like in between spaces. You're not, if you're in the steam room, you're not fully clothed nor fully naked generally. You're not in the gym working out, but you're also not in the shower getting ready to leave. And as a gay man, those spaces are also sexually charged, or at least erotically charged. And of course, this poem gets at that a little bit. And again, I think for queer folk of a certain age, those in between spaces were really important. They were all that we had, and the places we gathered tended to be on the fringes or in those in between spaces, and so that resonates for me as well.
And I could see myself, I think, as at a time before I had come out, having come out in life a lot later, and being in a space like that and trying to not look where I would make myself or anyone else uncomfortable, and find myself glancing down at the whorls on my wrists instead. And yeah, there's a lot that I think is said between lines.
I think in both poems too, so happens that the setting becomes a little bit unmoored. You've already alluded to that a little bit in this poem, but in the grandmother poem, in the nursing home poem, there is this, again, engaging with memory and how that spills over into the present as well. That seems to be something maybe that happens in both poems that I think is interesting. And I am drawn to poems as a reader as well, where you suddenly find yourself someplace you didn't expect.
Yeah.
And I think that I hope to have achieved that in this one as well.
Yeah, beautifully, really, because, I mean, if you talk in very blunt terms, you start off in a steam room with a bunch of men and you end up in the field with your dad. So it's quite a trip, but it makes it very, very natural. And I'm thinking that all of the time as we walk around, the world that we live in our heads at least, it's not moored completely to our surroundings physically. We carry around all of our memories and all of our past with us. And that's part of who we are and part of how we're experiencing this moment, even though I think that's hard to do maybe in other forms. I suppose it's done in memoir and in prose, but poetry, I think, is a unique way to be able to do that and really condense it down.
I'm proud of this piece, actually. It was one of the first ones that I wrote when I got back into writing poetry earlier in middle age than I am now. But I'm proud of the music, I guess. It was really trying to pack as much assonance and consonance and rhyme, internal rhyme and rhyme that I could. And I hope it contributes a little bit to that feeling in the steam room of things being a little bit of a mystical, magical place that's a little bit outside of reality. I think of Kay Ryan, who handles some of that really subtle internal rhyme and internal musical devices so deftly. I admire her work and her skill, her talent in doing that kind of thing.
So you chose then, for our third poem today, you chose Something by Lisel Mueller.
Hmm.
And it's one that I think you shared with me a long time ago and then brought back to my attention when we talked about this. Anything you want to say about this poem before you read it for us?
It's very different, perhaps, in some ways, than the stuff that we've read so far. It's a pretty well-known poem. Some of your listeners may be familiar with it, but it's almost a dramatic monologue in some ways. But I just find it so lovely, and that
Mm-hmm.
was the primary reason that I chose it. And I hope your listeners will hear why.
All right, let's go do it.
Monet Refuses the Operation by Lisel Mueller. Doctor, you say there are no halos around the streetlights in Paris, and what I see is an aberration caused by old age, an affliction. I tell you, it has taken me all my life to arrive at the vision of gas lamps as angels, to soften and blur and finally banish the edges you regret I don't see, to learn that the line I called the horizon does not exist, and sky and water, so long apart, are the same state of being. 54 years before I could see Rouen Cathedral is built of parallel shafts of sun, and now you want to restore my youthful errors, fixed notions of top and bottom, the illusion of three-dimensional space, wisteria separate from the bridge it covers. What can I say to convince you the Houses of Parliament dissolve night after night to become the fluid dream of the Thames? I will not return to a universe of objects that don't know each other, as if islands were not the lost children of one great continent. The world is flux, and light becomes what it touches, becomes water, lilies on water, above and below water, becomes lilac and mauve and yellow and white and cerulean lamps, small fists passing sunlight so quickly to one another that it would take long, streaming hair inside my brush to catch it, to paint the speed of light. Our weighted shapes, these verticals, burn to mix with air and change our bones, skin, clothes to gases. Ah, doctor, if only you could see how heaven pulls earth into its arms, and how infinitely the heart expands to claim this world, blue vapor without end.
Beautiful poem. Beautiful.
It's so lovely.
And I can
Yeah.
see some of what attracts you to it as well from what speaks out in some of your poems, that some of the musical work that's done here. Change our bones, skin, clothes, and you've got the bone and clothes.
Mm-hmm,
And there was
mm-hmm.
somewhere else that I was highlighting further up and lost it because I was just getting caught up in so much of this.
It's hard not
Fif-
to. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But the
Mm.
images, the images as well with
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
the wisteria. How can you separate the wisteria from the bridge which it covers?
Mm-hmm,
And I
mm-hmm.
love that idea. Um, it's not just a bridge and wisteria covering it. It's some sort of whole.
Mm. Yeah, this, it's a gorgeous piece. Even if you've never seen a Monet, you
Hmm.
know. And then if you happen to be familiar with his work, which a lot of folks are, it becomes almost ekphrastic, you know.
Yeah.
But this idea that there are no edges, there is no horizon, that
Mm-hmm.
everything bleeds into everything else, isn't that far off in some ways. That the universe is made of just a few building blocks.
Mm-hmm.
We are all stardust, as I know you're fond of saying, and I am fond of saying as well. And certainly in a time of much strife and conflict around the world, any small reminder that all boundaries are made up,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
is welcome to me. Yeah.
In a way, I guess physically, you did that in your poems in that you're there in a steam room, but you're also there in a kitchen
Mm,
somehow at the same
mm,
time. And you're also then at the same time in a field with your father. And those
mm,
things are all true at one time within
mm,
you. And all of that is one. And I think about that when I think I'm not a religious person anymore, but when I
mm,
think about people passing, what they leave behind, whether it's leftover stardust that becomes something
uh,
else, or as Walt Whitman said, becomes the leaves of grass eaten by cows that becomes milk that we drink, whatever. I'm
mm,
adding to what he said, I guess. But in that way, the people that have passed, we still carry them with us.
mm,
And the
mhm,
experiences that we've had, we still carry with us. But also, there's a unity of maybe those men who were strangers in
mm,
that steam room, all maybe experiencing it differently with their own series of memories and thoughts, and maybe trying to not look or maybe not thinking about anyone else in the room at all. And yet there's a unity there. And again,
yeah.
it's
And I
that
mean,
vapor that
my
connects them.
yeah, and my exhalation in the steam room becomes their inhalation.
Yeah.
The
Speaking of
sweat from
Whitman.
their body. Yeah, the sweat from their body is something that I take in as well. We 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 leak like crazy as human beings, and I find that delightful. So yeah, it's really astute. It's a really lovely observation. Connecting this to the other two poems. Thank you for that, David.
Oh, I didn't, like I said, sometimes it's just fun to see these things as you talk about it.
Mm.
In a way, it's like the creation of a draft of a poem. And I do say draft because obviously we tend to edit and revise and then sometimes I over edit. Have
We
to
all
step
do.
back.
We all do. Many of us do. I
but
should say.
yeah, that's part of the fun of experiencing the poem. And yeah, I hadn't thought about it until we got to the end and the vapor
Yeah.
with the blue vapor without end. There is that sort of unity, even as you're losing your grandmother, you're finding ways to keep her
Hmm.
as well.
Hmm.
Maybe that's one of the coolest connections that I see here among them is the unity of all things, whether it be through how we perceive them visually on the
Hmm.
outside or how we perceive them internally.
Yeah, I like that. I like that
Beautiful,
very much.
beautiful choice of work here, and it's delightful. We read each other's stuff so much, so it's delightful to kind of share that with some folks. And since we could go on for hours doing this sort of thing,
For sure.
and are often known to do, so thank you for being somebody who I bounced a lot of the ideas off for this whole podcast project, and also having the bravery to jump in and let me read some of your work and talk about what poetry means to us and how it connects us.
Mhm.
I appreciate that. So thank you for being here with me today.
It's been a
And
delight. Thank you so much for having me.
it definitely has. And I'll see you on the screen again very soon, I'm sure.
Probably next Sunday.
All right. Thanks, Joel.
Thanks, David.
Our three poems in this episode were two by Joel, the first one in the nursing home, and that was published in December Magazine, volume 31, in the spring and summer issue of 2020. The second poem, Steam, also by Joel, was published in Mud Season Review, volume 3, 2017. The third poem was Monet Refuses the Operation by poet Lisel Mueller, and that was from the collection Second Language Poems, published by Louisiana State University Press in 1986 and used with permission of the publisher. For information about upcoming episodes, you can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, or Blue Sky. And if you like what you hear, please do share it. Encourage your poetry family to tune in on their favorite podcast app or at in3poems.com or even on the In3Poems YouTube channel. I'm David J. Bauman, and this has been a conversation in 3 poems.